I'm Steve Lentini, and your host for this podcast, Different Thinking for Different Times, Season 5, Episode 8. So, all of my episodes have been around dealing with the limited thinker that we carry around with us. That small minded, limited thinker, that voice that some call the little tyrant, the hooligan, the little hooligan, as Rainier Maria Rilke called it in the late 1800s. I call it the acorn brain or the little fucker. And I can tell you that most people believe they're thinking. And for those interested in this podcast, perhaps they'll get on the journey of self-observation, which is the beginning of developing a level of thinking above that thinking. And the wonderful thing is there's no work to do. You just begin noticing. And yes, you're probably going to react still. But as you begin noticing, you'll choose, just by noticing, another path, another response. Because you've noticed where you reacted didn't serve you. That little small-minded thinker isn't working for you. And most people do make their thinking their master. But the whole goal of my podcast is to get people to question that and to rise above it and become the master of their thinking by expanding into the thinking that models the creator of the universe. It created something limitless. And I can tell you that when I left my body on November 18th, 2002, after 5 days in intensive care, the beauty is that thinking wasn't there. I was one with everything and nothing, one with the infinite. And that little thinker wasn't there with me. And I can tell you, I had no choice but to be in the now because there was only pure consciousness, but not like we think. Because we have ego and hubris. And we get educated. And I'm not making education wrong, but this society values the intellect. So accordingly, if you're more educated, the more letters you have to after your name, you'll be less subject to that small-minded thinking. And yet, we don't have to look far to see it's true. Some of our leaders are the most well-educated, and yet many, in fact most, are small-minded thinkers. When we point the finger at others and blame others, whatever side they're on, because we've gathered evidence to prove the other side is wrong, that's part of the small-minded thinker. In his book, Self-Observation, Red Hawk says, remember, our mind is like a computer, and this computer is very selective. If we receive up to 2 million discrete bits of information per second, our computer, the brain, can only handle about 2,000. Thus, it must reject roughly 1,998,000 bits of reality every second. On what basis does it decide to retain those 2,000 bits, which it assimilates? Well, I can tell you, it only selects those which verify and validate our own pre-programmed perceptions of the world. Thus, if you think everyone on the left is wrong, then you'll find evidence for that. It's called confirmation bias. If you think everyone on the right is wrong, you'll gather evidence to prove that everyone on the left is wrong. So our brain is making it all up into an agreement. If it believes, for example, Red Hawk goes on to say, I am no good, which he says is his computer's ruling belief, right? That's somewhere underneath the program. Running the program of his is that he's no good somewhere. And I can admit that I've had that belief and I see it, which impacted some of my choices in life, self-defeating as they were. Or if your computer, for example, believes that you're stupid or ugly or Iraq is evil or people on the right or left or Democrats or Republicans are evil, then it receives and assimilates only those bits which validate and verify this view of me or the world. Confirmation bias and small-minded thinking, right? We believe that little thinker that is making us wrong, that says that we're not so good. Here's the thing about self-observation. If you get on the journey of just noticing your thoughts, you can expand your thinking. You can rise into the thinking that models what created an infinite universe, whatever you call it. God or the Brahma, the Buddha, the Muhammad, the Christ, the Abraham, doesn't matter what you call it. So in the universe, even physicists say everything eats everything. That's how the universe started. All the little particles and bits that fit together started eating each other, right? The neutrons, neutrinos, protons, electrons, negative, positive, and they grew until they created the first star. In fact, that's probably what created the Big Bang that many people theorize about. But the law of everything eats and is eaten, it works on every level. Let me read you what Red Hawk says. From galaxy to atomic particle, from God to creature, from earth to man, related to this law is another. What gets fed grows stronger, and what doesn't get fed dies. As above, so below. And what is true in physics is true in metaphysics as well. Red Hawk goes on to say our psyche is lawfully constructed around a key element or neurotic fixation called variously in different traditions contamination, the cramp, the chief feature, the chief flaw, the petty tyrant, the acorn brain, the little fucker. I use the acorn brain in polite circles and the little fucker in the not so polite circles. So what's more is here's the key. We're addicted to the flaw. We believe in it. We call it the blind spot or the little tyrant, whatever we choose to call it, because it accurately describes its action upon our consciousness, and it feeds upon our available energy when we react. So if you begin this journey of self-observation, the beauty is there's nothing to do. Just notice. I don't have a program that you can enroll in that will make you miraculously better and less human. Just notice. And prove it to yourself. Never follow anyone or anything blindly, especially me. I'm full of shit somewhere. I wrote that book. You might be full of shit if. But I have proven this to myself, especially having the gift, the miracle of the comparison, not having the small-minded thinker when I went to the infinite, when I went to what's next from intensive care. And then back. Again in my body, that little thinker came back. But I now know that I can rise above it. And it doesn't have to be my master. That's the choice for you to make. You know, we can all see the flaws in others. We see that in society today, all pointing out flaws. Here's what Jesus says. Easier to see a mote or a speck of dust in your neighbor's eye than a beam or a log which holds up the roof in your own eye. the beam that holds up the roof. I love that. This is the law. We're constructed, and I'm reading again from Red Hawk's book, Self-Observation. Each of us has a flaw. We're constructed in such a way that we cannot see our own flaw, but we can easily see our neighbors. Earth is a school for flawed souls. There's a story about the Buddha. The Buddha, of course, as a child, was told they were watching him. Everyone was watching him because it was foretold that he was the next Buddha. And he began a journey of study and going with gurus and sages and reading every bit of wisdom that had been written up until that time, whatever had been recorded, until it exhausted him. So he was studying to become the perfect soul, the Buddha. And when he was exhausted with it and could no longer even move, he fell under a tree, where at some point he just started laughing. And you see the picture of the laughing Buddha. He's laughing at himself. He had just realized there was nothing to do other than embrace his imperfect humanity. We've stopped doing that as a society. We're pointing out all our flaws to our detriment. Our leaders are modeling that behavior and then expecting the general populace to behave differently. Religions do it. They point out all the flaws in the other religions and just stand up and say, this is the way. Our religion is the way. Some even kill over it. Or say that the creator of an infinite universe will damn you to hell. If it sounds small-minded, it's not what I experienced. We live in a miracle. This is the life school. It's our job to overcome that thinker and become the master of that thinker. But I would say, and I hate numbers like this, but because I hate generalizations, but I would say probably 95% of the population loves their thinker. They believe their thinker. And we don't have to look far to see how wrong it is. I do believe we should be teaching and educating our children. Imagine a society that couldn't read or write. But to put emphasis on the intellect, to make people with many letters and years of studying the masters, is foolish. We should be admiring only those that have overcome their thinking, and that would be no one. No one. Elitists like to think because they are so educated, they know it all. It's like Richard Rohr says, when we've been humbled, he prays to be humbled every day, to smash the ego, to let go of this thing that we call I know better or I am better. You're not. I'm not, at least. And until you consider it, you won't expand into limitless thinking and find the joy of questioning yourself. As Osho said, your answer's questioned. If you won't question yourself, you won't let anyone else question you. And if you won't question yourself, how can you rise above that thinker that you've made your master? Now, I'm not suggesting that we'll someday be teaching our children the value of overcoming their ego. I think it would be great if we included it in our education and giving more value to to that, to overcoming the ego and the hubris and the thought that we think we're better than anyone, anywhere. We're just another bozo on the bus. We have to get over ourselves. We're all full of shit somewhere. You can buy my book if you'd like on Amazon. You might be full of shit and if you prefer the one without profanity, you might be full of number 2. After all, we know better, the woke edition. And in the books, I'm not making fun of anyone. My journey is my business. Your journey is your business. And what I'd like you to do, if even one person does it, begin to question that small-minded thinker that resides in all of us. And I have no way to tell you that you will arrive somewhere someday where you will be the 100% master of your thinking. Even my little doggy, Reese, he's one of 4 of my dogs but Reese is the 8-pound poodle. He's barking. He agrees with me. He must hear. They can hear more than we can. It's in plain sight in our lives. We can see evidence that small-minded thinking doesn't work. And that's the gift in it. We're surrounded by it. You can rail against it, or you can just take the gift. That where we're heading to, we'll have none of that thought. When you get there, into what's next, I hope not before this recording ends, and you can begin that journey now and graduate from kindergarten in the Earth School. I think I might be in first grade, but that's all I'll give myself credit for. It's a fascinating journey. And I look with anticipation to leave this existence into what's next again, knowing that I will be one with the infinite thinker, a drop, like a drop of water in the ocean. I'll be a drop within the infinite, and I'll get to see more of what's next. What I learned was surrender to the now, because that's all there was. There was only the now. There was no past or future. I could not tie the events together until I was back in my body with the acorn brain. But I do have moments, because I have that glimpse, that peek at what's next, that peek at the infinite. I wish we could all get a peek, because we wouldn't be so petty. And all you have to do is notice where you're petty and small-minded and reacting. Notice who you react to and what. Just notice. Some days you'll stop. You'll decide to stop feeding those triggers, and they'll wither and die. And spend a few moments thinking of what you're feeding every time you react, because what you're feeding grows. It's a natural law. Now, I'm Steve Lentini, and you can reach me at steve@stevelentini.com. I'd love to have you as a guest. You can come challenge my thinking. I'm glad to let you do that. Again, Steve, I'll spell it, L as in Linda, E-N, as in Nancy, T as in Tom, INI.com. Remember, if you come on the show and challenge me, it's okay. And I might just ask you, does that sound like small-minded thinking? Thanks.